Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the World Class Championship Wrestling Review Series 1982 edition, and we are in the month of September, specifically the 18th is this particular episode. Relatively innocuous version of the program this week. Nothing really major. And it's interesting because with World Class, what seems to happen is about every 2 or 3 months, there are a couple, 2 to 3 can't miss shows, and then the rest of the shows are completely, I wouldn't say can miss, but they're not necessary shows. And maybe as I journey through all the territories, I'll find that too. I hope not, but maybe I haven't hit a point in World Class where there's, let's say 2 or 3 months of can't miss programming, but so we move into the opening tag match, Jose Lothario and Al Madril against King Kong Bundy and Bill Irwin. Bundy and Irwin at this point have been, and I believe continue to be, the tag team champions at this time. I don't think they've been defeated yet, although I don't see Bundy with the tag championship here, so and what I do is I check the footage as I watch just for notes that I miss in my note taking sometimes, so that's helpful. By the way, I am all the way up through the end of 1982 at this point. Irwin still is your Texas champion at this point. The match is what you'd expect. Irwin, again, I'm amazed by the guy. I think he's probably one of the better guys from Texas, at least at this point. As I go through all the way through 1988, I'll certainly learn where he ranks in all time, but he is by far the highlight of 1982 for me. But really basic stuff with Madril. Madril, the guy who's over, I don't really understand it because I wasn't there at the time. I will say he's not bad in the ring. Jose Lothario, though, a guy who is over because of his heritage. I don't necessarily think he'd be over if he didn't have a history in the area. I don't know that he went a bunch of places outside of Texas with a great deal of success. I understand his success in the Texas area, but he's very slow in plotting. He's not a guy that, outside of a diverse Hispanic market, I don't think he's going to draw a bunch of fans. But for those fans, he is their hero. He looks like them. He acts like them. He is a Hispanic voice. And I think in racially diverse areas, you need someone to represent the majority of your fan base even today. Now, that's not to say that I agree with racial segregation. I certainly don't. But I think you need to have a diverse, racially diverse, and physically diverse, sexually diverse character base so that everybody's represented. And if there's a certain town that is one race or preference or whatever over another, going that way. What's interesting in this match, at least to me, is that King Kong Bundy, who should still be treated like a star and should be still treated like a guy who is, a world beater, is actually spending the majority of a good, better part of 4 or 5 minutes on the mat having his leg attacked, which, for a guy like Bundy, just strikes me as odd. I don't understand the appeal in World Class of making Bundy look so human. Maybe for the Von Erichs if they're your top Hulk Hogan level baby faces, but I don't get it for here, especially when you've got a guy like Bill Irwin across the ring who can take the bumps and do things. Once Irwin's back in the ring, he takes over doing the more athletic stuff. Irwin spends a good bit of himself here as the Texas champion, and then the members of Gary Hart's organization cut off the ring. We see a good bit of that, and then we move into the ending of the contest, which they take up a good 10 minutes of the program, which in a 45-minute show is a pretty big deal. Um, but, we see Madrill and Bundy and the bunch. Bundy and Irwin are your victors here, much to the sadness of the fans and the baby faces alike. Bundy with a huge big splash on Lothario for the victory. Kevin Von Erich goes off on the Magic Dragon. He talks about the dragon being dangerous. He talks about the dragon being a guy who Gary Hart is manipulating and controlling. And we move through this match relatively quickly here. The Magic Dragon at this point certainly still pushed as a guy who would be maybe second from the top in terms of, maybe third from the top in terms of importance in the stable of Gary Hart, and Kabuki being the top guy, Bundy being second from the top. It's amazing to me that Kevin Von Erich, who, by the way, wrestles barefoot and seems to have, I don't know that he started that phenomenon among non-Polynesian stars, but it's the first guy I remember doing so on a consistent basis that is not of Samoan descent specifically, but he uses a lot more holds than I remember, be they arm bars, arm drags, body scissors, and the like. And it's just interesting because the memories I have of the Von Erichs, especially Kerry, remember my fandom started in '89, so my first exposure to Kerry was the Intercontinental title run, and he was very punch kick then. What he was in the '80s, so much different than what he ended up being in the early '90s and at the end of his life in 1993. Kevin, who never really did an abundance of things outside of the Texas territory, he made his way around to different territories, yes, but I think you'd have to be from Texas or watching World Class to see his best stuff. Much more wrestling diverse than Kerry, although David probably, with his height and everything, might be the best. He goes for the preponderance with the claw. The claw is obviously a very protected hold in Texas. Amazing that it doesn't matter if you are one of the, newer guys or an established heel. When the claw comes, you are certainly going to fall for it and fall to it much of the time. And Kevin is able and ready and willing to get an advantage here. He finally, at one point, goes for what seems to be a big victory roll, doesn't get it, slips off, gets the big splash victory for the win. Oddly enough, big splash victories in the first two matches of the program here, and Arman Hussein not happy with this. Hussein actually is up next in a wrestler capacity with Kerry Von Erich. Of course, Kerry is still close enough to the nature of his victory, or almost victory, not complete victory, but his dominance of Ric Flair, that he gets a very, very quick victory here over Hussein. Kerry does not waste any time. He only gets a few minutes match in there, and Kerry's a guy who, when he's on, he does well. When he's not, it's a struggle. But Kerry hits that discus punch. 1, 2, 3, only a couple minutes in the match, complete squash, but that's okay. Hussein, Irwin, and Bundy up next, talking about their dominance. The team of Irwin and Bundy really is very dominant. Interesting that Gary Hart, who actually has a managing stake in all of these folks, only comes out with Kabuki this week, and quite often only comes out with Kabuki most weeks. So I don't know if there is a backstory. I don't remember hearing it in commentary about why Hart is more focused on certain athletes than others, but we go to what seems like the seventh or eighth time this year with Kabuki and Bugsy McGraw as this time your main event. Bugsy willing to brawl it out. Bugsy, a guy who, even at an older age, can dominate and maintain a crowd control area. Bugsy goes with a big bear hug early and kind of does the frontward slam. Slower paced match. Kabuki always, it's funny, Kabuki matches who he's in the ring with, so you're not going to see Bugsy McGraw going 110 miles an hour. You're never going to see that, and thus Kabuki kind of matches the nature of that match. Lots of nerve holds, lots of slower things, always a kick here and there, or a big chop out of nowhere. Staying with the martial arts as the predominance of the gimmick. Kabuki knows how to sell but never oversells. And McGraw, one thing I'll give him credit for, even at his advanced age here, is always in every match he's in a discernible way. Kabuki does a lot of posing and posturing before Kabuki gets nailed with many jabs, and we move into the closing moments of the contest where good old Bugsy is able to manage to gain, I believe, the victory here. Let's just double check that. Bugsy, and what's interesting too, Bugsy's offense is relatively nondescript. It sends the referee down off Kabuki running into the referee after an elbow. Referee calls for that disqualification. Bugsy heads to the top rope, hits that top rope or attempted top rope splash, and I will get the phone. But then we see Kabuki come back. Referee comes in and ends the match with not acknowledging the disqualification. New referee, Branko Luvic, counts the fall for Kabuki as we close this week. And until then, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Good night, everybody.